Hello, it's that time of week again where we cover all things recycling on our regular podcast, Recycle, Don't Be a Waster. In some recent podcasts, we've covered landfills. We've discussed some of the things that landfills can do, such as produce energy, and generally suggested that landfills aren't that great an idea and that recycling is generally better. I suppose one reason we'll cover today is we look at one of the principal issues with landfill, that items disposed of in a landfill live there for a very, very long time. Sometimes the length of time is literally mind-boggling. And, when you consider the sheer volume, the tonnage that we're putting into these landfills on a regular basis, in all our capital cities, in all our regional cities, you have to start thinking these landfills are going to fill up as our population in Australia increases, or at least doesn't decrease, notwithstanding the last 2 years of COVID. And fundamentally, as our cities grow, and if we don't massively boost recycling, we are going to need more of these generally unpleasant facilities called landfills that have to be within a reasonable distance of major cities. Otherwise, the sheer shipping and transport aspect gets uneconomical and also emits more, greenhouse gases, leads to more traffic, etc. So the reality of these things is you have to have landfills in the suburbs, on the edge of cities, and of course that land is extremely expensive. And if you're like me, you're probably a NIMBY, N-I-M-B-Y, which I believe means not in my backyard. And let's be honest, no one in their right mind would want a landfill opening next door to their house. Smell mitigation is a lot better than it used to be, but at the same time, you're going to have some issues with that. You will have issues with increased traffic, heavy goods vehicles, all those sort of things. So, in an ideal world, I think we want to recycle. We want to minimize any landfill development that we need, so that we can do it in a sensible, much more controlled manner. So, what we'll cover today is I'm just going to go through and look at some of the lifetimes, the time it takes common or garden items to decompose in a landfill. Landfills they're a bit different to things rotting away in the general environment, as they're compacted generally. So this is something important to consider when items are dumped in a landfill. The atmosphere that the material is in is very different to what it would be like if it was on the ground. So the classic example would be an apple falling from a tree. Isaac Newton may be watching it or not, but an apple will fall from a tree, and if it lands on the ground, it will rot away, and there'll be carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and there'll be oxygen, and the chemical reactions will be very different than there will be in a landfill where it's compacted. Waste will be placed on top. There'll be virtually no oxygen in that environment, and when it rots away, it's a different chemical process than it would be normally, and that is argued to lead to more negative greenhouse gas emissions, more methane, etc., than you would usually have if that apple rotted naturally. But we'll leave that to a future episode, but I think that's something that's worth bearing in mind. So what we're looking at here is how long it takes just common items to decompose in a landfill. And if you ask me how is this being calculated, I actually don't know, but I assume people have gone back and looked into older landfills or sections of landfills that they knew were filled in 1940, 1950, etc. Go through the materials and see what you can find. I have seen instances where magazines or newspapers from the day President Kennedy was assassinated, these sort of things, and you can still read the print on newspapers even decades later. So some of it is incredibly surprising, and it really gives you an insight into how just the sheer volume of stuff it will fill those landfills up, and we'll need to move on. So simple items. Let's kick off with super simple items, and we have stuff such as cigarette butts. A cigarette butt, I would have assumed wouldn't last very long at all. Apparently it can last up to 12 years in a landfill. Once we get into even items such as leather shoes, which are from a natural material, from leather, they can take 25 to 40 years to break down and rot away. Milk cartons, which, the Tetra Pak style, 5 years. Even simple items such as cardboard, and this, harks back to the newspaper article, cardboard takes 2 months to break down. One that is quite scary is styrofoam, which you'll have for those classic, office coffee cups, etc. The information I have says that it does not biodegrade at all. So in theory, it potentially can last there forever. And when you think how spacious or how much volume or how much space styrofoam, expanded polystyrene takes up, that is sort of a scary thought. Getting into metal, so I would have assumed metal, tins, those sort of items would rot away quicker. Obviously, even your car, if it's not maintained, etc., it will rust and rot away. But a tin can is 50 years is the number I've got here. Aluminium cans, even more, 80 to 100 years. So very, very long period of time. Once we get into plastic and materials made from plastic, we are really getting into really long periods of time, to the point where you could almost call it infinite. Items such as sanitary pads, we have between 500 and 800 years, depending on the materials and that aspect. And we even have items such as glass, one of the oldest manufactured products I think humans have made. It in theory will never decompose. It will stay in landfill forever, which is obviously a terrible pity considering that we have very effective glass recycling systems and processes in 2022. So when you look at it in this regard, it really hammers home the importance of preventing these items getting into landfill, of keeping them out and of putting them into just more effective systems, more recycling, removing as much as possible, because clearly otherwise those landfills will fill up and the problem will snowball and we'll have more landfills and more problems. Even items we covered in previous episodes about food waste. Food waste, it doesn't rot away as quickly as many people may expect. Even a simple item as an orange peel, 100% organic, an orange peel takes up to 6 months to decompose fully. An apple core, I'm sure many of us have just thrown an apple core from a window to the side of a road or in a parkland as it's organic material. It can take around 2 months in a landfill. And even a simple banana peel can take up to 10 days. So, it's bizarre. Some of these items you'd almost imagine they would rot away quicker in your own kitchen if you didn't, if they weren't consumed. But in the landfill, in the ecosystem or the environment of a compacted landfill, it does change things quite considerably. So I think when we're bashing landfills, I suppose that is what we do often on these podcasts. When we say negative things about them and argue and lobby that we need better solutions, this is one of the fundamental reasons. At the end of the day, if materials rotted away and decomposed super fast, the problem wouldn't be that great. Clearly, there would still be issues with emissions. There would be issues with misusing or not using materials. Hence, we'd have to produce new ones. But fundamentally, if it rotted away, we could continually use the same landfill over and over again. But when you consider, I think we covered on a previous podcast about nappies or diapers, as North Americans would call them. I think it was over a billion disposable nappies disposed of per annum in Australia alone, and you're thinking that these items take up to 800 years to break down. What are we talking about here? We're talking is that nearly 1 trillion nappies in landfill in Australia if modern society continues without changes, over 800 years, we're talking, getting close to 1 trillion. Not even sure how many zeros that is at the end, but that is a preposterously large number of nappies in landfill, rotting away, taking up space and wasting resources. So I think it's good for us to, as people who are focused on recycling, who care about recycling and the environment, know your enemy is an old saying. Know what you're up against. And in this instance, landfill has clear dangers, clear and significant dangers. So I think we'll leave it there today. Once again, like and subscribe. That helps us with the algorithms on the different podcast mechanisms. And of course, leave comments if there's anything you would like, to hear me discuss, hear us talk about, or any guests you'd like to have us try and get on the show, just leave those messages, and I read them all. Okay, thanks very much. Have a great day, and once again, recycle. Don't be a waster.